The hospital room fell silent as Emma clutched the tiny hand of her newborn daughter. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at Mark, her boss of 5 years, who stood beside her with equal emotion in his eyes. "I never thought I'd be a mother," she whispered. "And I never imagined you'd be the reason why." Their journey, from a desperate request in a corporate office to this moment of pure joy, had changed everything. But the path that led them here was anything but simple. If you're touched by what you've heard so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the extraordinary connections we can form when we open our hearts to others. Emma Parker had always been the model of efficiency. As the executive assistant to Mark Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations, she prided herself on anticipating his needs before he even voiced them. For 5 years, she'd managed his calendar, prepared his presentations, and even remembered his mother's birthday when he forgot. But nothing in her job description could have prepared her for the request he made on that rainy Tuesday afternoon. The office was quiet, most employees having left for the day. Emma was gathering her things when Mark called her into his office. She found him standing by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, his usual confident posture replaced by something more vulnerable. "Emma, I need to ask you something personal," he said, turning to face her. His eyes, usually sharp with business acumen, were clouded with uncertainty. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds," she replied, automatically slipping into professional mode despite the unusual tension in the room. "Mark, please. After 5 years, I think we're past formalities." He gestured for her to sit, then perched on the edge of his desk instead of taking his usual seat behind it. "I'm 42 years old, Emma. I've built this company from nothing. I've achieved everything I set out to do professionally." Emma nodded, unsure where this was heading. "But I've realized something recently." His voice dropped lower. "Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I want a family. I want a child." "That's wonderful," Emma said, genuinely happy for him. Mark had been divorced for 3 years, and she knew he dated occasionally, but nothing serious had materialized. "The thing is," he continued, "I don't want to wait for the right relationship to come along. I've been looking into surrogacy, but the agencies, the legal complications, it's overwhelming." Emma's heart rate quickened. Was he about to ask her to research surrogacy agencies? To vet potential candidates? It wouldn't be the strangest task she'd handled for him. "I want a baby, Emma." His eyes locked with hers. "Can you help me?" The question hung in the air between them, its weight almost tangible. Emma's mind raced through possible interpretations, landing on the most logical one. "You want me to help you find a surrogate?" she asked carefully. Mark shook his head. "I want you to be my surrogate." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know it's an enormous thing to ask," Mark rushed on. "But I trust you completely. You're healthy, intelligent, kind, all the qualities I'd want for my child. I would compensate you generously, of course, and cover all medical expenses. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." Emma's thoughts whirled chaotically. This was beyond inappropriate, beyond unexpected. Yet something in his expression, raw hope mixed with fear of rejection, stopped her from immediately refusing. "Mark, she began, but he cut her off. "Don't answer now. Take some time to think about it. I know it's a lot." Emma nodded numbly and somehow found her way back to her desk. She gathered her belongings with mechanical movements, her mind still processing the conversation. As she headed for the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text from her brother, Jake. "Dad's in the hospital again. Nothing serious, but could use your help with Lily tomorrow." Reality crashed back. Her father's chronic illness. Her 5-year-old niece, Lily, whom Jake had been raising alone since his wife died in childbirth. The responsibilities that already filled her life to the brim. The next morning, Emma arrived at Jake's modest home at 6 a.m. He greeted her with grateful exhaustion etched on his face, his police uniform already on for his early shift. "You're a lifesaver, Em," he said, kissing her cheek. "Lily's still asleep. Dad should be discharged this afternoon, just another flare-up." "Go," she urged him. "We'll be fine." After Jake left, Emma made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, Mark's proposition still echoing in her mind. The absurdity of it struck her anew. She was 34, single, with no desire to have children of her own. How could she possibly carry a child for her boss? A small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Auntie Emma." Lily stood in the doorway, her curly hair a wild tangle around her sleepy face. Emma's heart melted as it always did at the sight of her niece. "Good morning, sunshine," she said, opening her arms. Lily climbed into her lap, smelling of sleep and the strawberry shampoo Jake used because he claimed it made detangling easier. "Is Grandpa okay?" "He's fine, sweetheart. We'll visit him later today." As the morning progressed, Emma helped Lily with breakfast, got her dressed, and then sat on the floor playing with dolls. Watching Lily's imagination at work, Emma felt a familiar pang. Jake was doing his best, but Lily missed having a mother. And Jake, Emma knew he was lonely, though he never complained. By the time they visited her father at the hospital, Emma had made her decision. She would decline Mark's offer, of course. It was too bizarre, too complicated. She would suggest professional surrogacy agencies instead. But life, as Emma was about to discover, rarely follows the paths we carefully plan for it. When she returned to work the following day, Mark was uncharacteristically absent from the morning executive meeting. His text came just as she was wondering whether to call him, "Working from home today. Could you stop by after work? Need to discuss yesterday." Emma spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation. By the time she pulled up to Mark's elegant townhouse that evening, she had rehearsed her refusal a dozen different ways. Mark answered the door himself, looking different in jeans and a casual sweater than in his usual tailored suits. "Thanks for coming," he said, leading her to a spacious living room she'd only seen once before, during a holiday party. "Mark, about your proposal," Emma began, determined to get it over with. "Before you answer," he interrupted, "there's something I need to show you." He led her down a hallway to a room she hadn't seen before. When he opened the door, Emma's breath caught. It was a nursery, or the beginnings of one. A crib stood assembled in one corner, a rocking chair by the window. "I know it seems premature," Mark said softly. "But I wanted you to see how serious I am about this." Emma turned to him, confused. "You've already prepared a nursery, but you don't even have a surrogate yet?" "I'm hopeful," he replied simply. Something about his quiet certainty touched her. "Mark, I can't be your surrogate." "I'm sorry." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand. It was too much to ask." "But," Emma continued, surprising herself, "I might know someone who could help you." Mark's expression brightened. "Really? Who?" Emma took a deep breath. "My brother, Jake. He's a single dad with a 5-year-old daughter. His wife died giving birth to Lily." Mark's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry about his wife, but I don't understand how he could help with surrogacy." "Not surrogacy," Emma clarified. "Adoption. Jake's been talking about having another child, but dating is nearly impossible with his schedule as a police officer and caring for our dad, who has chronic health issues." "You're suggesting I adopt your brother's future child?" Mark asked, clearly confused. "No," Emma said, the idea forming as she spoke. "I'm suggesting you meet Jake. He's an amazing father who wants another child but can't manage dating. You're a successful man who wants a child but doesn't have a partner. Maybe there's a solution that could work for both of you." Mark stared at her, processing her words. "You mean, co-parenting?" With a man I've never met? It sounds crazy, I know, Emma admitted. But Jake is the best person I know. And she hesitated, then decided honesty was necessary. You're a good man, Mark. Different from Jake in many ways, but good. I think you could learn from each other. A week later, Emma watched nervously as Mark and Jake shook hands in her apartment. She had invited them both for dinner, along with Lily, who was currently showing Mark her favorite stuffed animals with the unfiltered enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. So, Jake said after they had eaten and Lily was occupied with a movie in the living room, Emma tells me you want to be a father. Mark nodded. I've achieved everything else I wanted in life. But lately, I've realized there's a void that success can't fill. Jake studied him. Parenthood isn't something you achieve, Reynolds. It's something you live, every day, through sleepless nights and scraped knees and moments of pure terror when they get sick. I know it won't be easy, Mark replied. But nothing worthwhile ever is. Emma watched the two men, so different on the surface, yet connected by this fundamental desire for family, begin to talk in earnest. Jake spoke of the challenges of single parenthood, while Mark asked thoughtful questions. By the end of the evening, nothing concrete had been decided, but a seed had been planted. Over the next few months, a strange friendship developed. Mark began inviting Jake and Lily to weekend activities, the zoo, museums, even a camping trip that left the impeccably groomed CEO muddy and exhausted but smiling wider than Emma had ever seen. Jake, initially skeptical of the corporate suit, gradually warmed to Mark's genuine interest in Lily and his willingness to learn about parenting without pretending to know everything. Emma watched in amazement as these two men from different worlds found common ground in their shared values about family. 6 months after that first dinner, Jake called Emma late one night. I think I'm going to do it, he said without preamble. Do what? Emma asked, though she already knew. Mark and I have been talking about co-parenting. Really talking about it. We've consulted a family lawyer about the legal arrangements. We're considering surrogacy. Emma sat down, stunned despite having witnessed their growing friendship. Are you sure about this, Jake? It's a huge decision. I've never been more sure of anything, Jake replied. Mark isn't just some rich guy looking for a trophy child anymore. He genuinely wants to be a father, and he respects what I bring to the table as someone who's already raised a child. Plus, Lily adores him. And the logistics? Your house is barely big enough for the two of you, and Mark's townhouse isn't exactly child-friendly beyond that one nursery. Jake chuckled. That's the other thing. Mark's looking at houses in my neighborhood. He says Lily shouldn't have to change schools, and I shouldn't have to commute farther to the precinct. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. The Mark Reynolds she had known 5 years ago would never have considered moving to Jake's modest neighborhood. He's really serious about this. We both are, Jake confirmed. Which brings me to why I'm calling. We found a surrogate through an agency Mark researched. But we need an egg donor. Mark suggested you. Emma nearly dropped the phone. Me? Not as a surrogate, Jake clarified quickly. Just as an egg donor. That way, the baby would be biologically related to Lily, a real cousin. But we'll only consider it if you're completely comfortable with the idea. Emma's mind raced. This was different from carrying a child for 9 months, but still significant. Yet the thought of helping create a family for her brother and for Mark, who had become almost a friend in his own right, filled her with unexpected warmth. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Jake replied. Take all the time you need. 2 weeks later, Emma sat in a fertility clinic, having made her decision. The process would be complex. Her eggs would be harvested and fertilized with Mark's sperm, then implanted in the surrogate they had selected, a kind woman named Sarah who had been a surrogate twice before. As the doctor explained the procedure, Emma glanced at Mark and Jake, who sat side by side, their expressions a mixture of hope and anxiety. She thought about how far they had all come from that rainy day in Mark's office. None of them could have predicted this outcome. The journey through fertility treatments was arduous. There were disappointments. The first embryo transfer failed, leaving everyone heartbroken. Sarah remained optimistic, assuring them that such setbacks were common. 3 months later, they tried again. This time, it worked. The pregnancy progressed normally, with Sarah sending weekly updates and ultrasound images. Mark and Jake threw themselves into preparations, converting a room in Jake's house, which Mark had helped renovate, into a nursery while finalizing the purchase of a home just 3 blocks away for Mark. Emma watched in amazement as her boss transformed before her eyes. The man who once couldn't remember to eat lunch without her reminders now researched baby formulas and sleep training methods with the same intensity he had once reserved for market analyses. Jake, meanwhile, shared his hard-won parenting wisdom while admitting there was always more to learn. Lily, now 6, was ecstatic about becoming a big cousin. She helped paint the nursery and selected stuffed animals for the baby, solemnly informing Mark which ones were best for different developmental stages based on her own extensive experience. 7 months into the pregnancy, Sarah called with alarming news. She was experiencing complications and had been admitted to the hospital. The baby, a girl, might need to be delivered early. The next 24 hours were a blur of hospital corridors and worried consultations with doctors. Emma took time off work to help with Lily while Jake and Mark maintained a vigil at the hospital. When Sarah went into premature labor, both men were there, supporting her through a difficult delivery. Sophia Grace Reynolds Carter came into the world 6 weeks early, tiny but fighting. She was immediately taken to the NICU, where she would remain for the next month. Mark and Jake established a rotation, ensuring one of them was always with her while the other cared for Lily and managed work responsibilities. Emma visited the hospital daily, marveling at the tiny being who was, in some biological sense, partly hers. Yet she felt no maternal claim, only a profound aunt's love, similar to what she felt for Lily. Watching Mark and Jake hover anxiously over the incubator, consulting with doctors and learning to change diapers smaller than their palms, she knew Sophia had found her true parents. Sarah recovered well and visited Sophia regularly during her hospital stay. She had made it clear from the beginning that her role was as surrogate only, but she formed a warm relationship with the Unconventional family, promising to remain in touch as Sophia grew. The day Sophia was finally cleared to go home was emotional for everyone. Mark and Jake had decided she would live primarily at Jake's house initially, with Mark staying in the guest room until his nearby home purchase was finalized. The arrangement raised eyebrows among some of Mark's business associates, but he dismissed their concerns with newfound confidence in his priorities. "My daughter needs stability and both her fathers close by during these critical early weeks," he told Emma when she relayed some office gossip. "Anyone who can't understand that isn't someone whose opinion I value." The first year of Sophia's life transformed them all. Mark learned to function on minimal sleep, discovering reserves of patience he never knew he possessed. Jake, despite having done this before, found that parenting a newborn while also raising a school-age child presented new challenges. They made mistakes, argued over approaches, and sometimes questioned their sanity in undertaking this journey. But they also experienced joy in its purest form: Sophia's first smile, her first laugh, the first time she rolled over. Lily embraced her role as cousin sister with pride, reading stories to Sophia and solemnly explaining the world to her uncomprehending but attentive audience. Emma, watching from her unique vantage point as both colleague and family, marveled at how life's strangest turns could lead to its greatest blessings. Mark was still her boss, but their relationship had evolved into something more complex and meaningful. She had become an integral part of this unusual family constellation, spending weekends at Jake's house and helping with both girls. On Sophia's first birthday, they gathered in the backyard of Mark's new home, a comfortable 4-bedroom house with a swing set that Lily had helped select. Friends and family mingled, some still slightly confused by the arrangement but won over by the obvious love surrounding both children. As Emma helped Jake set out the birthday cake, she caught Mark's eye across the yard. He was holding Sophia, who was dressed in a pale blue dress Emma had bought for the occasion. The CEO who had once intimidated boardrooms with his intensity now cooed nonsense at a drooling baby who had him wrapped around her tiny finger. "Did you ever imagine this?" Jake asked, following her gaze. Emma shook her head. "Not in a million years. When you first suggested I meet him, I thought you'd lost your mind," Jake admitted. A rich CEO and a cop co-parenting? It sounded like a bad sitcom. And now? Jake smiled as Mark approached with Sophia. "Now it feels like the most natural thing in the world." The party was a success, with Sophia smashing her cake as expected and Lily proudly helping to open presents. Emma found herself sitting with Sarah, who had become a friend to them all. "They're amazing fathers," Sarah observed, watching Mark and Jake tag team a diaper change with the efficiency of a NASCAR pit crew. "I've been a surrogate 3 times now, and I've never seen 2 people more committed to being parents." "They've come so far," Emma agreed. "Mark used to call me at 3 a.m. about business emergencies. Now he calls Jake to discuss whether Sophia's rash needs a doctor or just cream." As the party wound down and guests departed, Emma found herself helping with cleanup while Mark put Sophia down for a nap and Jake took Lily to the park across the street. In the quiet kitchen, Emma reflected on the strange journey that had led them here. "Penny for your thoughts," Mark said, entering the kitchen. Emma smiled. "Just thinking about that day in your office. If you had told me then that we'd end up here, I would have suggested a psychiatric evaluation." Mark laughed, the sound easy and relaxed in a way it never had been before fatherhood. "I was desperate that day. I had everything society told me should make me happy, and yet I felt empty. I had no idea what I was really asking for. And now? Now I know that what I wanted wasn't just a child, it was a family." He leaned against the counter. "I never expected that family would include your brother, or Lily, or even you in the way it has. But I can't imagine it any other way now." Emma nodded. "Jake says the same thing. He was so closed off after Maria died. Focused only on Lily and work. I worried about him. We've been good for each other," Mark acknowledged. "He's taught me that parenting isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, every day, even when you're exhausted or uncertain. And maybe I've helped him see that accepting help doesn't make him less of a father." The back door opened, and Jake entered with Lily, who immediately asked about Sophia. "Still napping, sweetheart," Mark told her. "But she loved the special birthday card you made her." Lily beamed. "When she wakes up, can I show her how to use the new blocks?" "She's a bit young for blocks," Jake explained patiently. "Remember how we talked about babies developing at their own pace? But I can still show her," Lily insisted. "She watches everything I do. Dad says I'm her role model." "You absolutely are," Mark agreed, exchanging an amused glance with Jake over her head. As Lily skipped off to check on her cousin, Emma observed the silent communication between the 2 men, the kind that develops between parents who have weathered midnight feedings, fevers, and first steps together. 2 years later, Emma stood in the courthouse, watching as Mark and Jake signed the final adoption papers that would make their co-parenting arrangement legally recognized. Though they had established legal guardianship early on, this step formalized what had already been true in their hearts: they were both Sophia's fathers, with equal rights and responsibilities. Sophia, now 3, sat on Emma's lap, playing with Emma's necklace. Lily, 8 and serious, stood beside them, holding a small bouquet of flowers she had insisted on bringing because it's like a wedding for Sophia. The judge, initially perplexed by their unusual situation, had become supportive after reviewing their case and meeting with the family. "I've seen all kinds of family arrangements in my courtroom," she told them, "but rarely one with so much thought and love put into it." After the formalities were complete, they celebrated with ice cream. Emma watched as Sophia alternated between Mark's and Jake's laps, completely secure in the love of both her fathers. Lily explained the significance of the day to her cousin with the gravity of someone much older, while Sophia nodded as if she understood every word. "Auntie Emma," Sophia said suddenly, reaching for her. "Ice cream?" Emma took her from Jake, marveling at how this child, biologically connected to her but not her daughter, had become such an important part of her life. "Yes, sweetheart. More ice cream." "Not too much," Jake cautioned. "Remember what happened last time?" Mark laughed. "One upset stomach and you're still traumatized. She'll be fine." "Easy for you to say." "She was at your house when the sugar crash hit," Jake retorted, but there was no heat in it, just the comfortable banter of co-parents who had found their rhythm. Later that evening, as they gathered at Jake's house for dinner, a regular occurrence despite Mark having his own home nearby, Emma found herself in the kitchen with both men, preparing a meal while the girls played in the living room. "I've been thinking," Mark said, chopping vegetables with the skill of someone who had learned to cook out of necessity rather than passion. "The company's expanding to the West Coast. They want me to head up the new division. Jake's hand stilled on the pasta he was draining. "You're moving to California?" "No," Mark said firmly. I turned it down. "My family is here. I offered to consult and travel occasionally, but my place is with Sophia. And Lily. And you guys." The simple declaration hung in the air, powerful in its certainty. Emma remembered the ambitious CEO who had once cancelled a vacation because a minor deal was closing. That man was gone, replaced by someone who understood what truly mattered. "Good," Jake said simply. Because explaining that to the girls would have been impossible. "Besides," Mark added with a grin, "who would help you coach Lily's soccer team? You're hopeless with the formations." Says the man who showed up to the first practice in leather loafers, Jake shot back. Emma laughed, struck by how completely Mark had integrated into their lives. He still ran his company with characteristic efficiency, but now he scheduled meetings around school events and pediatrician appointments. Jake still worked long hours as a detective, but he had accepted that having Mark as a co-parent meant Sophia and Lily always had someone there when emergencies arose. 5 years after that rainy day in Mark's office, Emma sat in her own living room, hosting a small gathering to celebrate her promotion to Chief Operations Officer at Reynolds Innovations. Mark had been grooming her for the role for years, recognizing her talents even as their personal relationship evolved into something more like family than employer-employee. Sophia, now 5 and looking remarkably like Lily had at that age, with hints of Emma's features that sometimes startled her, was showing her latest art project to Emma's father, who had defied medical expectations and stabilized enough to enjoy his granddaughters and honorary granddaughter. Lily, 10 and growing more confident by the day, was explaining something to Mark with animated gestures while Jake watched them with obvious pride. The two men had developed a partnership that transcended conventional definitions, not romantic partners, but life partners in the raising of their daughters. "They're quite something, aren't they?" Sarah said, joining Emma on the couch. She had remained a part of their extended family, visiting several times a year and maintaining a special bond with Sophia. "They really are," Emma agreed. "Sometimes I still can't believe how it all worked out." "It worked out because you saw a possibility that no one else did," Sarah observed. "You connected two people who needed each other but would never have found each other otherwise." Emma had never thought of it that way. She had simply been trying to help her brother and her boss, two people she cared about who wanted the same thing. I guess sometimes the most unconventional solutions are the right ones. "Speaking of unconventional," Sarah said with a smile, "Jake mentioned you've been seeing someone?" Emma felt herself blush. At 39, she had finally met someone who understood her commitment to her unusual family constellation. "David. He's a professor at the university. He's coming by later to meet everyone." "Brave man," Sarah teased. "Meeting the whole clan at once." "He knows what he's getting into," Emma replied. "I was very clear that my family situation is non-negotiable." Across the room, Sophia broke away from her grandfather and ran to Emma, climbing into her lap with the easy confidence of a child who knows she is loved. "Auntie Emma, when is your boyfriend coming? Daddy and Papa want to ask him questions." Emma groaned, imagining the interrogation David would face from both Mark and Jake, who had become surprisingly protective of her over the years. "Soon, sweetheart. Be nice to him, okay?" "I will," Sophia promised solemnly. "I'll show him my new books and tell him that you're the best auntie ever and that if he's mean to you, Daddy and Papa will be very disappointed." Emma stifled a laugh. "Maybe don't mention that last part." Sophia nodded seriously before scampering off to rejoin Lily. Emma watched her go, this child who existed because of an impossible request made in a moment of vulnerability. None of them could have predicted where that request would lead, to an unconventional family bound not by traditional ties but by choice, commitment, and love. Later that night, after David had survived the gentle but thorough vetting by both fathers, and, more intimidatingly, by Lily, Emma found herself in the kitchen with Mark and Jake, just as they had been countless times over the years. "He seems decent," Jake conceded, putting away the last of the dishes. "High praise from you," Emma teased her brother. "He passed the Lily test," Mark added. "She's a better judge of character than both of us combined." "True," Jake agreed. "Remember that client you almost partnered with until Lily said he had mean eyes? And then he turned out to be under investigation for fraud," Mark finished. "Never doubted her instincts since." Emma leaned against the counter, watching these two men who had become an inseparable unit despite their differences. "Do you ever think about how strange this all is? How one conversation changed everything?" Mark's expression grew thoughtful. "I think about it every day when I look at Sophia. How close I came to missing this, all of this." He gestured to encompass not just the house but the family they had created. "I was so focused on having a child that I didn't realize what I really needed was a family. And I was so determined to do everything alone," Jake added. "After Maria died, I thought accepting help somehow dishonored her memory. Now I know she would have been the first person to tell me to open my heart to new possibilities. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Well, I'm glad you both figured it out, because those girls are pretty amazing. They are, Mark agreed. And so is their aunt, who made it all possible. As they joined the others in the living room, Emma watched David chatting easily with her father while Sophia and Lily performed an elaborate dance they had choreographed. The scene was chaotic, loud, and utterly perfect. 5 years ago, a desperate request in a corporate office had set in motion events none of them could have foreseen. A boss had asked for help becoming a father, never imagining that the true answer would come not through surrogacy but through an unexpected connection with a single dad who was already raising a daughter alone. I want a baby, Mark had said. Can you help me? And in finding the answer to that question, they had all discovered something far more valuable than they had been seeking, a family defined not by biology or convention, but by love, commitment, and the daily choice to show up for each other, no matter what. As Sophia climbed into Mark's lap and Lily leaned against Jake's shoulder, Emma knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we create ourselves, one unexpected connection at a time. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the many ways families come together. Remember that love isn't always conventional, but it's always worth fighting for.